Hello, this is James with a new story on my author channel. I hope you enjoy my story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The rusted keys in my hand felt like a condemnation, a bitter inheritance that threatened to dismantle my already fragile life. Little did I know, the crumbling shack my parents left me in the desolate expanse of Wyoming held more than just dust. It held the forgotten echo of my true identity, waiting to unravel the carefully constructed fiction of my existence. Hello, my name is Leo Vance, and I am 42 years old. I work as a banker in a small branch in Dayton, Ohio. If I had to characterize my life before this moment, it would be like a placid stream, calm and predictable, yet lacking true vitality. I wasn't one for self-disclosure, preferring to blend into the background, to navigate life without drawing attention. But since you're here, accompanying me on this unexpected journey, I will try to help you understand who I am and why I am standing before this decrepit structure, holding a set of rusted keys, my heart a vortex of conflicting feelings. I was raised in Dayton, in a middle-class area where all the houses were identical, with white walls, red-tiled roofs, and meticulously groomed lawns. A perfect tableau of suburban normalcy. My parents, Robert and Helen Vance, were simple people, their lives a testament to quiet diligence. My father worked as a car mechanic, his hands perpetually stained with grease, while my mother was a dedicated elementary school teacher, her days filled with the laughter and lessons of young children. They loved Ethan and me, but theirs was not a demonstrative affection. Hugs were rare, praise was subtle, and their approval was often conveyed through unspoken gestures. They instilled in us the values of kindness, compromise, and always prioritizing family harmony, often at the expense of individual desires. Yet, there was always a missing element, a piece I could never quite identify. A quiet emptiness in our otherwise ordered home. My parents seldom discussed our family's history, a subject that seemed to make them uncomfortable, even distant. I only knew what I had painstakingly pieced together from fragmented, almost whispered tales, that my great-grandfather belonged to the Lakota tribe, a Native American people who once roamed the expansive prairies of the Great Plains, their lives interwoven with the land, the buffalo, and the rhythm of ancient ceremonies. My grandfather, Samuel, was the last member of our family to maintain any significant ties to that rich culture, but he passed away when I was too young to have any memory of him. My father, perhaps out of desire for us to assimilate seamlessly into city life, or perhaps due to his own buried pain, rarely mentioned my grandfather or our Lakota heritage. The little I did know came from obscure, almost mythic stories. My great-grandfather was a proficient hunter, a revered figure whose connection to the natural world was profound. My grandfather worked on a ranch near the breathtaking Wind River Range, and our family had, at some point, left their ancestral lands to forge a new, supposedly simpler life in Ohio. I don't hold it against my parents. They simply wanted a simpler existence for us, free from the stigma of being different or facing the prejudice often directed at Native Americans in a bustling, predominantly white city. However, sometimes, when I'd look in the mirror at my dark brown eyes and thick black hair, features that hinted at a deeper ancestry, I would wonder, who am I really? A part of me, a quiet, almost forgotten whisper, longed to connect with those origins, but I had no idea how to begin, or even if it was truly my place to do so. Ethan, my younger brother by 4 years, was fundamentally different. He was always the focal point, effortlessly drawing attention with his tall, athletic build and a grin that effortlessly charmed everyone he met. Ethan was ambitious, sharp, and never hesitated to do what was necessary to achieve his goals, even if it meant stepping on others. As children, he always got the larger piece of dessert, the more impressive toy, and a lion's share of our parents' focus and praise. I wasn't envious, or at least that's what I constantly told myself. As the older brother, I was supposed to be accommodating, to yield, to set an example of selfless compromise. But sometimes, in the quiet solitude of my thoughts, I questioned if I was too passive, too willing to fade into the background, as Claire so often suggested with a withering look. Claire, just thinking of her name now causes a tightness in my chest, a lingering echo of the storm she brought into my life. We met 15 years ago at a lively party hosted by a mutual friend. She came from a prosperous family in Columbus, a bright, assertive woman with piercing green eyes that seemed to see right through me, and flawlessly coiffed blonde hair that framed a face of determined beauty. Claire claimed to be attracted to my mild disposition, my perceived honesty. "You're different from other men," she had told me, her voice a soothing balm. "You're honest and dependable, not like the arrogant types I usually meet." I fell for her instantly, captivated by how she infused life into everything around her, how she moved with a purpose I so utterly lacked. We married after 2 years, and her parents, as a wedding gift, bought us a small, unassuming house in the Dayton suburbs, a gesture for which I was genuinely thankful, but that always made me feel subtly beholden, as if I had yet to earn my own standing. Our marriage wasn't flawless. Arguments were frequent, fueled by Claire's relentless ambition and my quiet contentment. But it was stable, predictable. Claire was a real estate agent, perpetually occupied with contracts, client meetings, and the pursuit of higher commissions. I, on the other hand, was happy with my desk job at the bank, finding a quiet satisfaction in the tranquility of numbers and balancing accounts. But Claire desired more. She wanted me to advance in my career, to become the powerful, influential man she imagined I could be. "Leo, you can't continue to let others take advantage of you," she would say, her voice tinged with disappointment, sometimes even contempt. "You let Ethan walk all over you. You let your coworkers surpass you for promotions. Are you going to spend your whole life as a nonentity, invisible and unremarkable?" I never knew how to reply. I had no desire to compete, no wish to become a ruthless man like Ethan. But each of Claire's words was a sharp cut, eroding my self-worth, making me question myself. Was I truly weak? Had I allowed life to drift by without standing up for anything important? Everything shifted one afternoon in a crisp March when I received a call from hospital. My parents, Robert and Helen, had been killed instantly in a horrific car accident on the freeway. A speeding truck, hydroplaning on slick asphalt, had spun out of control and collided head-on with their car. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I don't recall driving to the hospital, only the chilling sensation of upon my arrival, the cold corridor floor beneath me as I collapsed, tears flowing down my face uncontrollably, an ocean of grief I couldn't contain. Ethan came later, outwardly composed, his jaw set, but I noticed the subtle tremble in his hands as he filled out the necessary forms, a fleeting crack in his polished facade. The funeral was a somber affair, a blur of condolences and hushed whispers. Ethan and I barely communicated, exchanging only brief, strained comments about the arrangements and the endless stream of guests. Claire was by my side, holding my hand, her grip firm, but I sensed an emotional distance in her gaze, a subtle disapproval. Perhaps she was let down that I wasn't displaying the fortitude she expected. Maybe she believed I should have done or said something to assert my position as the older brother, to take control amidst the chaos. A week later, my parents' attorney summoned us for the formal reading of their will. I didn't anticipate much. My parents were not wealthy, and I presumed their modest assets would be divided equally, fairly. But when the stoic lawyer, Mr. Thompson, began to read the formal document, it felt as though the floor had given way beneath me, plunging me into an abyss of disbelief. Helen and Robert Vance leave their house in Dayton, Ohio, along with all personal assets, to their younger son, Ethan Vance, the lawyer stated in a measured, dispassionate tone. To Leo Vance, they leave a property in Pine Ridge County, Wyoming, along with all its contents. I was utterly floored, a sudden rush of blood to my head. The Dayton house was where Ethan and I had grown up, filled with countless memories of our parents, our childhood. It was well kept, comfortable, and worth a substantial amount in the current market, a secure asset. The Wyoming house, I didn't even know of its existence, had never heard word of it. I only had a dim, vague recollection that my grandfather had lived somewhere in the distant mountains. Ethan glanced at me, a cryptic, almost smug smile playing on his lips, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. "I guess Mom and Dad knew you weren't a city person, Leo," he remarked, his tone a disarming mix of jest and underlying seriousness. I didn't answer, merely nodding, trying desperately to conceal the rising feeling of injustice, the bitter tang of betrayal that filled my mouth. Claire, however, was entirely unable to mask her fury. On the drive home, as the city lights blurred past, she erupted, her voice a torrent of scathing disbelief. "You're just going to accept this, Leo? A dilapidated shack in the middle of nowhere, while Ethan gets the entire estate. Everything our parents worked for? You're the older brother, for God's sake, and you let your younger brother treat you like this, walk all over you." Her words were sharp, accusatory. "It was their wish," I said, my voice barely a whisper, weak even to my own ears. "I didn't want this, Claire. I just wanted peace." "Their wish?" she scoffed bitterly, her green eyes flashing with scorn. "Your parents clearly thought little of you, Leo. And you don't even put up a fight. You're weak, Leo. You have always been weak, afraid to stand up for yourself." Her words struck me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that left me breathless. I wanted to retort, to tell her I didn't need the house, that I just wanted to maintain peace with Ethan, that I wasn't driven by greed, but I was speechless, utterly paralyzed. Perhaps, deep down, a terrifying part of me feared she was right. That evening, the tension in our suburban home reached a breaking point. Claire, her face etched with a mix of disgust and disappointment, expelled me from the house. She said she couldn't live with a man who didn't defend himself, who allowed himself to be perpetually walked over. "Go, Leo," she ordered, her voice cold and unyielding, gesturing emphatically to the door. "Go to that worthless house of yours in Wyoming. Don't come back until you've done something, anything, to prove you're a man, to prove you're worthy of my respect." I didn't resist. I was too numb, too defeated. I packed a few articles of clothing, grabbed my car keys, and drove into the desolate night. I wasn't sure if I was escaping or desperately seeking something, anything to validate my existence. But by dawn, I was on the highway, heading west for Wyoming. The rusted keys the lawyer had given me felt heavy and strangely symbolic in my pocket, the weight of an uncertain future. The Wyoming house, as per the documents, was located in a small, isolated town called Cedar Creek, nestled amidst towering mountains and vast, whispering pine forests. I had never been there, had never even heard of it, but as I navigated the winding roads, leaving behind the monotonous plains of Ohio, a peculiar sensation came over me, an uncanny feeling as if I were returning to a place I had never seen, yet somehow deeply recognized. Or perhaps I was just so utterly exhausted and hurt that my mind was deceiving me, playing tricks in the twilight of my despair. When I finally arrived, dusk was setting in, painting the sky in hues of deep orange and purple. The house stood before me, a crooked, almost spectral shape in the dimming light. It was smaller than I had anticipated, forlorn and forgotten, with weathered shingles, several shattered window panes like vacant eyes, and thick, grasping ivy consuming the facade. But instead of feeling let down, instead of a renewed surge of disappointment, I felt a strange, almost magnetic sense of intrigue. There was something about this house, a silent promise of a secret awaiting discovery, a story yearning to be told. I got out of the car, gripping the keys firmly, the cold metal digging into my palm. A sharp, cold breeze blew, carrying the invigorating smell of damp soil and ancient pine. I took a deep breath, the crisp air filling my lungs, my heart racing with an unknown anticipation. This was my inheritance, I thought, and whatever it held, whatever truth lay buried within its walls, I was resolved to find it. I moved forward, the gravel crunching under my worn boots with each deliberate step, the only sound in the vast stillness. The set of keys felt weighty and cold in my hand, as if they bore the burden of generations of past secrets, silently waiting to be unlocked. The front door, made of dark, heavy wood, groaned like an old man as I fit the largest, most ornate key into its rusted lock. It took all my strength. I had to push it with my shoulder to force it open, in a wave of damp, musty air, smelling strongly of decaying wood, ancient dust, and something indefinably wild washed over me. Inside, the last dying rays of twilight streamed through several holes in the collapsed roof, casting eerie, shifting patterns of light on a cracked, uneven wooden floor. An old, plain table stood deserted in the center of the room, near a brick fireplace filled with ash and soot, long cold. There was no sign of life, no working lights, no family photographs adorning the walls, no personal trinkets, no indication of a family having lived there recently. It felt as if time itself had abandoned this place. But rather than feeling disappointed, a strange compulsion, an undeniable pull, settled over me. The house seemed to speak to me, not in words, but in a profound, silent language, as if it sensed I was there not just to observe its decay, but to find something vital, something long lost. I placed my backpack on the floor, the thud echoing in the vast silence, and took out the powerful flashlight I had meticulously packed from Dayton. Its faint yellow beam cut through the gloom, scanning the room, illuminating its hidden corners, revealing cobwebs hanging like ancient lace. The house was not large, consisting of a single, open living room, a small, cramped kitchen, and a narrow hallway that led to several other small, dark rooms. I explored each one with a growing sense of purpose, my footsteps echoing like a heartbeat in the profound silence. The master bedroom was bare except for a rusty bed frame and a single, dusty old blanket draped over it, like a forgotten shroud. Another room appeared to be for storage, with a few decaying wooden crates strewn about, their contents long since rotted away or pilfered. But when I pushed open the final door in the hallway, my heart began to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This door was unique, unlike any I had ever seen. It was fashioned from solid oak, darker and heavier than the others, and adorned with elaborate, deep carvings, depictions of majestic eagles soaring through stylized suns, with fluid lines that flowed like a winding river, almost alive under the flashlight's beam. I had never seen anything like it, certainly not in the sterile, modern suburbs of Ohio. My hands shook with a mixture of excitement and trepidation as I tried the keys in the ornate lock, but none of them worked. I tested every single key in the large, heavy set, but the solid oak door remained stubbornly sealed, an impenetrable barrier. A combination of rising frustration and intense curiosity compelled me to persist. I shone the flashlight around the doorframe again, meticulously examining every inch, and saw a small, almost imperceptible gap at the very bottom corner. A hidden entrance, perhaps? A secret passage? I knelt, my knees protesting on the cold, gritty floor, and touched the gap, feeling a loose wooden panel. With some effort, grunting as I applied pressure, I managed to pry it open, revealing a dark, tight, almost claustrophobic space. I hesitated for only a second, then crawled through, my heart pounding as if it would burst from my chest. Inside was a small room, no larger than a walk-in closet, yet felt like a universe. My flashlight's beam revealed dusty wooden shelves filled with objects I had never seen before. Artifacts imbued with an ancient aura. There were pottery vessels with complex, vibrant patterns, hide-stitched with colorful, intricate threads, and displayed prominently, an eagle feather headdress with immaculate white plumes, each feather perfectly preserved, radiating a profound spiritual energy. In a corner sat an old, heavy wooden chest, intricately carved with the powerful image of a wolf howling at the moon, its silhouette stark and primal. My breath caught in my throat. These were not just ordinary items. They possessed a profound significance, like scattered pieces of a larger, epic narrative. I opened the chest with great care, my movements slow and deliberate, afraid of breaking something precious, something irreplaceable. Inside lay a leather-bound book, thick and heavy, its pages yellowed and brittle with the passage of time. I carefully, reverently, turned to the first page, where elegant, handwritten words appeared, faded but still legible. To those who carry the blood of the Lakota, preserve and cherish. Below was my grandfather's signature, Samuel Vance, and a precise date, August 15th, 1947. A shock went through me, an electric current of revelation. This was my family's true heritage, not the crumbling house, not the mundane life in Dayton, but what it held within these hidden walls. This was my lineage. I sat on the cold floor, completely absorbed, leafing through the book. It was more than a diary. It was a living chronicle of my family, of the Lakota people, their triumphs, their sorrows, their enduring spirit. My grandfather wrote vividly about my great-grandfather, a revered warrior named Madonagi, or Bear Spirit in the Lakota language. He described the era when the tribe inhabited the vast, open plains, hunting buffalo, their lives dictated by the seasons, conducting sacred ceremonies under the boundless, starlit sky. He wrote of their profound losses when white settlers arrived, seizing their ancestral land, decimating their way of life, and confining the once free tribe to desolate, cramped reservations. But most of all, he wrote of their incredible fortitude, their unyielding spirit, how my great-grandfather had painstakingly hidden these sacred artifacts, not for monetary gain, but to save them from being stolen or destroyed by the invaders, so that one day his descendants could find them and carry on their people's story, their memory. I didn't notice the tears streaming down my face until they fell onto the brittle, yellowed pages, blurring the ancient script. I had never felt so utterly connected to my grandfather, my great-grandfather, or my tribe as I did in that profound moment. All those years growing up in Dayton, living a life devoid of true purpose, I had been a stranger to my own heritage, a ghost disconnected from my own past. But now, sitting in this dusty, sacred room, surrounded by echoes of a forgotten time, I felt as if I were being called by name. Not Leo Vance, the timid banker, but Leo, descendant of Madonagi, a carrier of Lakota blood, a guardian of memory. I spent the entire night studying the artifacts, each one a silent storyteller. Each one told a tale, each one vibrated with history. The eagle feather headdress, my grandfather wrote, was used in ceremonies to call for rain, to connect with the heavens. The pottery vessels, he explained, contained the sacred ashes of fallen warriors, concealed to prevent their desecration by the advancing U.S. Army. A small drum, covered in worn deerskin and adorned with faded painted symbols, still produced a deep, resonant sound when I tapped it lightly with my finger, a heartbeat across generations. I had no idea of their monetary worth, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that they were priceless. They were history, a living testament, the very soul of a people I had never truly known, but who were now undeniably a part of me. The following morning, with the first light filtering through the mended roof, I called an old college friend, Mark, an archaeologist at the University of Wyoming. I briefly, almost incoherently, described my astonishing discovery, and he, intrigued by my unusual tone, agreed to drive out to see it, a 4-hour journey he made without hesitation. When Mark entered the hidden room, his eyes widened with the unbridled excitement of a child finding untold treasure, his professional demeanor momentarily forgotten. Leo, do you grasp the true significance of what you have here? He asked, his voice shaking with awe, his fingers trembling as he hovered over the headdress. These artifacts, they could be worth millions, not just in monetary terms, though that would be immense, but for their unparalleled historical and cultural value. This is the legacy of the Lakota, preserved almost perfectly, the kind of find that museums worldwide would pay a fortune, literally a king's ransom, to acquire. I was taken aback, stunned by the sheer scale of his words. Millions of dollars. That kind of money could buy back the Dayton house, settle Claire's every debt, allow me to live a life of unparalleled comfort and luxury, free for financial worries. But as the thought entered my mind, I felt a profound, almost visceral resistance. These artifacts weren't for sale. They didn't belong in a sterile museum or a private collection, locked away behind glass. They belonged to me, no, not just to me, but to my family, to the Lakota people, to the descendants of Madonagi. Mark left after vowing to get in touch with an expert on Native American culture for a more detailed assessment and preservation plan. I remained in the house, continuing to read my grandfather's book, soaking in every word, every story. With every page, I learned more about the profound hardships my family had endured, the sacrifices they had made. My grandfather wrote about how my father, Robert, had ultimately decided to leave Wyoming for Ohio, hoping his children would have a more straightforward, easier life, free from the struggles and prejudice he had faced. But he also wrote of his deep sorrow as he saw my father distance himself from the rich Lakota culture, severing those vital ties. Robert believed assimilation was the only path to survival for his children. He wrote, his words aching with regret. But I know that if we forget our origins, if we deny our true selves, we lose ourselves completely. Those words cut deep, resonating with my own experiences. I thought of my parents, how they had meticulously avoided any mention of my grandfather or the tribe, almost as if it were a shameful secret. Perhaps they were afraid that talking about the past would expose me and Ethan to the same prejudice they had encountered. But now I understood they were profoundly mistaken. The past was not a weight, not a burden. It was a source of immeasurable strength, of unique identity. In the days that followed, filled with a newfound purpose, I began to restore the house, treating it not as a dilapidated structure, but as a sacred vessel. I swept the dusty floors, mended gaping holes in the roof with salvaged lumber, and painstakingly cleaned the artifacts with the same reverence one would show to precious jewels. Each day, I felt a stronger, more profound bond with my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and the ancestors I had never met but who now felt vibrantly present within me, guiding my hands. I began to have vivid, almost prophetic dreams of endless, rolling prairies, the rhythmic sound of drums echoing across the vast expanse, and a man with long, braided hair standing on a distant hill, looking out at the horizon, his silhouette outlined against the setting sun. One afternoon, as I was carefully cleaning a small, intricately patterned pottery vessel, there was a soft knock on the front door. I was startled, as Cedar Creek was a truly remote place, and I hadn't seen anyone besides Mark since my arrival. I opened the door to an older man, his presence radiating calm authority. His skin was deeply suntanned, weathered by years under the elements, and his silver hair was neatly tied back in a single, elegant braid. He wore a simple, faded shirt, but his eyes were remarkably sharp, deep pools of wisdom, as if they could see directly into my soul. "I'm Jacob Gray Wolf," he said, his voice deep, resonant, and calm. "Mark sent me. You're Leo, Samuel Vance's grandson." I nodded, a sense of rightness settling over me, and invited him inside. Jacob entered the secret room, his gaze sweeping over the artifacts, and when he saw them, his eyes shone with an emotion I couldn't quite place, a profound pride mixed with a deep, ancient sorrow. He reached out and touched the eagle feather headdress, his gnarled fingers trembling slightly, almost reverently. "Do you understand how important these are, young man?" he asked, his voice hushed with awe. "They are not just objects. They are the spirits of your ancestors, of our tribe, the living embodiment of our enduring culture." Jacob then proceeded to tell me about the rich, tragic history of the Lakota, about the brutal wars, the profound ceremonies, and how their vibrant culture was systematically suppressed, but had miraculously endured through the resilience of individuals like my grandfather, Samuel. He explained that my grandfather had been a keeper of their culture, a silent guardian, meticulously hiding these artifacts to keep them from falling into the greedy hands of those who sought to erase the tribe's memory, to obliterate their very identity. Samuel believed that one day, someone from his lineage, someone with his blood, would find them, Jacob said, his gaze fixed on me. "And that someone is you, Leo." I felt a great weight settle upon my shoulders, the mantle of a profound responsibility, but also a fierce fire igniting within my heart. I was no longer just Leo, the timid banker from Dayton. I was a descendant of warriors, of storytellers, of resilient people who had lived and died to protect their sacred culture. But my path, I soon learned, was not without formidable obstacles. A week later, Ethan, my brother, appeared. He drove up in a sleek, expensive SUV, its polished chrome glinting in the sun, and walked into the house with his usual air of unshakable confidence, surveying the dilapidated interior with thinly veiled disdain. "Brother Leo, I hear you've struck gold," he said, his tone playful, almost jovial, but his eyes were sharp and calculating, assessing me, assessing the house. Mark told a friend, and the news, as it always does, reached me. "Those artifacts are worth a fortune, Leo. A real fortune." My blood ran hot, a surge of protective anger. "They are not for sale, Ethan," I said, trying to maintain a calm, steady voice, but my hands clenched into fists. "They're our family's legacy, our tribe's." Ethan laughed loudly, a dismissive, cynical sound that grated on my ears. "Legacy? Come on, Leo, don't be so sentimental. Sell them, we split the money, and you could live like a king, free from this dump. I'm even willing to trade the Dayton house for this place, if you want. Think about it. A fresh start, financial freedom. His offer was unsettling, a tempting whisper in my ear. The Dayton house, filled with a lifetime of memories of our parents, of our shared childhood, a symbol of the stable life I had always known. A part of me, the old Leo, wanted desperately to accept, to return to Claire, to my old, comfortable life, to escape this overwhelming responsibility. But as I looked at my grandfather's sacred book, as my gaze fell upon the majestic eagle feather headdress, something deep within me solidified. I knew I couldn't. No, Ethan, I said, my voice firmer, clearer, more resonant than I had ever heard it. They don't belong to us to sell. They belong to the tribe, to the Lakota people. Ethan shook his head, looking at me as if I were utterly insane, a fool clinging to impossible dreams. You'll regret this, Leo, he said, his voice laced with venom. Before he turned and left, the roar of his SUV's engine echoing in the quiet valley. You always regret your weakness. Ethan's departure left me with a gnawing sense of unease. His offer, trading the familiar comfort of the Dayton house for this one, along with the priceless artifacts, was like a stone thrown into a still pond, creating ripples of thoughts I had tried to suppress, doubts that lingered at the edges of my new conviction. I sat in the hidden room, still holding my grandfather's leather-bound journal, my gaze fixed on the eagle feather headdress on the shelf, its white plumes pristine. The flashlight's beam caught the feathers, making them glimmer like distant stars against the ancient wood. But my mind had drifted back to Dayton, to Claire, to the life I once believed was sufficient, a life of quiet compromise and predictable routine. I stood up and went out onto the porch. The night in Cedar Creek was cold, sharp, the air thick with the invigorating scent of pine and damp earth, a living fragrance that filled my senses. The sky was a brilliant canvas of stars, so vast and bright I could trace every constellation, every whisper of the cosmos. I had never seen a sky like this in Ohio, where city lights always muted everything, dulling the celestial display. Here it was sharp and real, as if I stood at the very center of the universe, connected to something ancient and immense. I wondered if my grandfather had ever stood on this same spot, looking at this same sky, feeling what I felt now, the immensity, the solitude, the profound connection. Had he ever confronted temptations like the ones I was now facing, the lure of easy money, the comfort of assimilation? The next morning, I received a call from Claire. Her voice on the phone was not as cold, not as accusatory as it had been during our last conversation. It was soft, almost tender, reminiscent of when we first fell in love, a gentle siren song. Leo, she began, her tone measured, I heard from Ethan about the things you found. Did you really find a treasure, Leo? He says they're worth millions. I held the phone tightly, my heart pounding a frantic drum against my ribs, anticipating the battle. It's not treasure, Claire, I replied, my voice steady, resolute. It's a legacy. It belongs to our family, to the Lakota tribe. Claire was silent for a moment. Then she let out a soft, almost pitying laugh. You're always so romantic, Leo, but I'm more of a realist. If those things are worth millions, as Ethan claims, you could sell them. We could pay off our debts, buy a new house, travel the world, live the life we always dreamed of. Don't you want that life? A life without financial worries, without constant struggle. Her words were indeed a siren's call, conjuring vivid images I had once longed for. A larger, more opulent home, exotic beach vacations, the tangible respect of colleagues and family, a life of effortless ease. But at the same time, I felt a deep-seated resistance, a powerful urge to recoil. These artifacts were not a lottery ticket. They were living history, the very soul of my ancestors, a sacred trust. Selling them would be a betrayal not only of my grandfather's dying wish, but of myself, of a newfound purpose that had ignited within me. Claire, I said, trying to keep my voice even, unwavering, you don't understand. These things are not for sale. They are worth more than money, more than any material comfort could provide. She sighed, her tone shifting abruptly to one of sharpness, of thinly veiled contempt. You're still the same, Leo, always idealizing everything, always living in a dream. Do you think those old relics will change anything real? They won't pay the bills. They won't bring happiness. You're living in a foolish dream, and I'm tired of waiting for you to wake up. I wanted to argue, to tell her I had found happiness not in money, but in reconnecting with my roots, in discovering who I truly was, but I remained silent. I knew that no matter what I said, Claire wouldn't understand. She couldn't see what I saw, couldn't hear what I heard in the wind rustling through the ancient pines. I'm coming to Wyoming, she said before abruptly ending the call. I want to talk to you in person. You can't keep running away forever, Leo. I stared at the dark phone screen, sensing a storm on the horizon, a final confrontation. Claire always had a way of unsettling me, of making me doubt myself, of eroding my confidence. But this time, I was determined not to let her sway me. I returned to the secret room and sat before the wooden chest, drawing strength from its presence. I opened my grandfather's book again, searching for solace and guidance in his wisdom. He wrote of a time when my great-grandfather, Mato Nagi, was tempted by a smooth-talking English trader who offered vast amounts of gold and silver for the tribe's most sacred items. Mato Nagi refused, even though the tribe was on the brink of starvation. Money can buy food for today, my grandfather wrote, his words a beacon across time, but only spiritual value, only our enduring culture can sustain us through generations, can feed our very souls. Those words were like a flame, pushing back the encroaching darkness in my heart, solidifying my resolve. I knew I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for those who had fought and suffered to preserve this priceless heritage. Claire arrived a week later on a drizzly afternoon, the Wyoming weather reflecting the mood. She wore a tailored beige coat, her blonde hair tied up high in a sophisticated bun, looking both impeccably chic and utterly aloof, a stranger in this wild landscape. As she stepped into the house, she wrinkled her nose delicately at the peeling wooden floor, the cracked walls, the pervasive scent of damp earth and old wood. "Are you really living like this, Leo?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of disbelief and genuine disdain. "This isn't a home. It's a pile of rubble. This is how you're choosing to live." I didn't reply, simply leading her, without a word, to the secret room. When she saw the artifacts, her eyes lit up, not with awe or wonder, but with a sharp, calculating glint, like a predator seeing its prey. She reached out and touched a pottery vessel, her fingers tracing its ancient patterns as if she were appraising it, calculating its market value. "These things, they're beautiful," she said, her voice smooth, almost seductive. "Are you certain they're worth a lot? If so, I know an auction house in Boston, a very reputable one. We could make an absolute fortune, Leo." "Claire," I interrupted, my voice firm, cutting through her materialistic reverie. "They're not for sale." She turned, her carefully constructed smile vanishing, replaced by a mask of anger and hurt. "Are you serious, Leo? Are you truly serious? You're going to keep them here, in this dilapidated house, to rot along with you? Leo, this is a chance to change our lives, your life. We could have everything." "Maybe," I said, looking her directly in the eye, my gaze unwavering but not mine. I found my purpose here. These artifacts are not just objects. They're the living history of my family, of the Lakota tribe. I have a responsibility to protect them, to share them, not to sell them. Claire shook her head, her frustration mounting, then moved closer, placing a hand on my shoulder, trying to reclaim her influence. "You've changed, Leo," she said, her voice softening, attempting a different tactic. "I don't recognize you anymore, but I still want us to try again. Sell them, and we can start over truly. I'll forgive everything. How you let Ethan walk all over you. How you disappointed me. How you were always so passive. We could be happy, Leo." Her words were like a knife, but this time they didn't wound me. I gently, but firmly, removed her hand, feeling a new, quiet strength radiating from within myself. "Claire, I don't need your forgiveness," I said, my voice clear and unwavering. "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just doing what's right, what feels true to myself. If you can't accept that, then maybe we don't belong together anymore." She stared at me, her piercing green eyes glistening with unshed tears, but I could see it wasn't love in them. It was defeat, the realization that she had lost her grip on me. "You'll regret this, Leo," she said, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "You'll be alone, and you'll regret it for the rest of your life." She turned abruptly and walked out, her footsteps echoing sharply on the old wooden floor, leaving me standing alone in the room with the artifacts, my silent, ancient companions. I felt no regret. For the first time in my life, I felt I had truly stood firm against temptation, against immense pressure. I was no longer the weak Leo who always yielded to maintain a fragile peace. I was Leo, descendant of Mato Nagi, who had chosen, definitively, to protect his legacy. But the temptations did not end there. A few days later, a stranger arrived at my door in a sleek, black car. He introduced himself as a representative from a prestigious private museum in Detroit. Having heard about the artifacts from an anonymous source, undoubtedly Ethan, still lurking in the shadows. He offered to purchase the entire collection for an astounding $3 million, promising to include my name prominently on a list of honor donors, a guarantee of lasting fame. "Mr. Vance, this is an incredible opportunity for these items to be known to the world, to be seen by millions," he said, his voice as smooth as silk, oozing persuasion. "We will display them with the respect and reverence they truly deserve in a state-of-the-art facility." I looked at him, anger slowly rising within me, a hot tide of indignation. "Deserve?" I asked, my voice cold sharp. "You think putting them behind glass in a museum, disconnected from their people, is deserving? They belong to the Lakota tribe, to the living people who lived and died to protect them. You can't buy their spirits, sir." The man gave a slight, dismissive smile and a shrug. "I'm just making an offer, Mr. Vance. If you ever change your mind, here's my card." He left, leaving behind a lingering sense of unease. I knew there would be others, more offers, more pressure, and I would have to be stronger than ever. After the encounter with the man from Detroit, I knew with certainty that I couldn't keep the artifacts hidden in this room forever. They needed to be protected, not by mere concealment, but by allowing them to live on through education, through stories, through vibrant community. The idea of a cultural center began to form in my mind. Not a cold, static museum, but a dynamic, vibrant place where the Lakota people and others could learn, connect, and feel profound pride in their heritage. I started by contacting Jacob Gray Wolf again. He came to the house one morning, bringing a thermos of aromatic herbal tea and a warm, knowing smile. I shared my vision with him, my voice filled with a passion I barely recognized as my own, and he listened intently, nodding slowly, his eyes shining with approval. "You're on the right path, Leo," he said, his voice deep and comforting. "Samuel would be incredibly proud of you. But this is not something you can do alone. You need the community, Leo. We must do this together." Jacob, true to his word, introduced me to others in the Lakota community in Pine Ridge County. I met Sarah Bright Sky, a traditional weaver whose hands moved with breathtaking grace, and David Swift Arrow, a venerable elder who knew hundreds of sacred ceremonial songs by heart. They welcomed me not as an outsider, not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a family member returning home after a long, arduous absence. I felt a profound connection I had never experienced before. Not with Claire, not with Ethan, but with people who shared my blood, my history, and my newfound purpose. Sarah and David helped me plan the cultural center. We decided to restore the entire house, transforming it into a versatile space, a dedicated area to respectfully display the artifacts, and rooms to hold classes on the Lakota language, traditional weaving, and ancient ceremonies. I used all my savings, every last penny, to purchase building materials, and the community, with incredible generosity, contributed their invaluable time and effort to help with the repairs, working tirelessly alongside me. During those days filled with sweat and laughter, the house truly came back to life. We replaced the entire leaky roof, repainted the faded walls in warm, earthy tones, and created an inviting outdoor space for ceremonies and gatherings, a fire pit at its heart. But not everyone was supportive of the project. One evening, while working with Sarah, I discovered that Ethan, still relentless in his greed, had contacted a real estate company to try to sell the house without my permission, exploiting some obscure legal loophole. I was enraged, my temper flaring, but Jacob advised me to remain calm, his presence a steady anchor. "Your brother is blinded by greed, Leo," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "But you do not have to be like him. Focus on your mission, on your purpose. That is your true strength." I immediately hired a skilled local lawyer to block Ethan's underhanded actions. And after several tense weeks of legal wrangling, I eventually secured full, undisputed legal ownership of the property. It was a small victory, perhaps, but it made me feel stronger and more resolute than ever before. I was no longer afraid to face Ethan, Claire, or anyone else who tried to take my legacy from me. One beautiful summer morning, bathed in the soft, golden light of dawn, the cultural center officially opened its doors. We held a traditional ceremony, the deep, resonant sound of drums echoing through the crisp morning air and the sweet, cleansing smoke from sacred tobacco rising toward the vast, blue sky. Jacob led the ritual, his voice chanting ancient prayers, and I stood by his side, wearing a simple shirt beautifully embroidered by Sarah, my heart filled to bursting with pride and gratitude. Dozens of people from the Lakota community and other tribes attended, along with curious locals interested in Native American culture, their faces etched with interest and respect. I stood before the crowd, holding a microphone, and for the first time in my life, I share my entire story. I spoke of my journey from the placid stream of Dayton to the wild, transformative landscape of Cedar Creek, of discovering the artifacts, and how they had helped me understand who I truly am, beyond the banker, beyond the timid brother. "I used to think I was weak," I said, my voice trembling slightly with emotion, but undeniably clear. "But now I know that strength doesn't come from money or power. It comes from knowing where you belong, from knowing your true identity, and fighting fiercely to protect it." The crowd applauded warmly, and I saw tears glistening in Sarah's eyes, tears of shared understanding. After the ceremony, a young girl, no older than 10, came up to me clutching a small, exquisitely beaded necklace in her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Vance," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "I never thought I could be proud of being Lakota, but today I am. You made me feel proud." Her words were a gift, a profound affirmation that I had made the right choice, that my journey had meaning beyond myself. The cultural center was not just a place to preserve artifacts. It was a living, breathing place to cultivate pride, to nurture hope, and to forge deep, lasting connections. I stood there amidst the laughter and conversation, the lingering scent of ceremonial smoke in the air, and felt a sense of peace I had never known in my entire life. But deep down, I knew my journey was far from over. This house and these artifacts had helped me find my roots, but more importantly, they had helped me find myself, the true Leo Vance. I, Leo Vance, once called weak, once living a life of quiet compromise, was now at a new beginning. Not because I had become someone else, but because I had finally embraced who I truly am, a man of Lakota blood with a sacred duty to protect my ancestors' legacy and a heart that yearned, finally, for true meaning. In the weeks following the center's opening, I was busier than ever, a whirlwind of newfound purpose. Each morning, I would wake up early, brew a strong cup of coffee whose aroma filled the quiet house, and begin my work with a sense of eager anticipation. Some days, I collaborated closely with Sarah Bright Sky, meticulously arranging artifacts for display, carefully documenting their intricate stories as recounted by the wise Jacob Gray Wolf. On other days, I would sit patiently with David Swift Arrow, listening intently as he taught me ceremonial songs, his voice rising and falling like a bridge to our ancestors' plains, guiding me through the complex melodies. I was still clumsy, often mispronouncing Lakota words and making everyone laugh with my awkward attempts, but I felt no shame. Each small step, each new word learned, brought me infinitesimally closer to my heritage, to the people who now felt like my true family. But I didn't always feel strong, not every moment. Some nights, after the center had closed and the last visitor had departed, I would sit alone in the quiet of the secret room, staring at my grandfather's leather-bound journal, wondering if I was truly capable of carrying this immense responsibility. The pressure was not just external. From Ethan's persistent greed, Claire's lingering disappointment, or the endless offers to buy the artifacts, but also profoundly internal. I feared failure, feared that I might inadvertently damage this sacred legacy, that I wasn't truly worthy of the profound trust placed in me by my grandfather or the entire Lakota community. One evening, as I was carefully cleaning the delicate eagle feather headdress, lost in my thoughts, Jacob walked in, his presence a quiet comfort. He said nothing at first, just sat on an old wooden chair, holding a stick of sacred tobacco. He lit it, the fragrant smoke curling lazily through the air, and finally looked at me, his gaze gentle but perceptive. "You're worried, aren't you, Leo?" he asked, his voice as low and soothing as the wind through the ancient forest. I sighed, setting the headdress down with a quiet clink. "I don't know if I'm doing this right, sir," I admitted, the vulnerability raw in my voice. "I want to protect these things, to make this center meaningful, to honor my ancestors, but I'm scared. Scared that I'm not truly capable. I didn't grow up Lakota. I'm just a banker from Dayton who found his roots a few months ago, a complete novice." Jacob smiled, the smile of someone who had seen too much of life's struggles to be easily shaken, someone who understood the complexities of the human heart. "Do you think Mato Nagi, your great-grandfather, was never afraid?" he asked, his voice a gentle challenge. He faced an entire army, knowing he could not win conventionally, yet he fought with unwavering courage for his tribe, for his people. Strength is not the absence of fear, Leo. Strength is doing what's right, even when you're trembling, even when your heart is pounding with doubt. His words were like a cleansing breeze, clearing the fog in my mind, bringing clarity to my purpose. I realized this journey wasn't about achieving perfection or never feeling fear, but about having the courage to move forward, to continue learning, even when the destination was uncertain. Jacob then handed me a small, intricately woven necklace made from sweetgrass and colorful beads. "Wear this," he said. "It will remind you that you are not walking alone. Your ancestors are with you, Leo. We are all with you." I put on the necklace, feeling the coolness of the sweetgrass against my skin, a tangible connection. From that night on, whenever I felt a pang of doubt, I would touch the necklace and feel the comforting presence of my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and Jacob standing silently behind me. My journey of self-discovery didn't just occur within the walls of the house or the cultural center. It unfolded in countless small, everyday moments, in the invaluable lessons the Lakota community patiently taught me. One sunny afternoon, Sarah invited me to her home, a cozy dwelling filled with the scent of herbs and weaving, where she was teaching a group of children traditional weaving techniques. I sat quietly and watched as their small, nimble hands moved expertly across the looms, creating intricate patterns of breathtaking beauty. Sarah explained the profound meaning behind each design: the zigzag for lightning, symbolizing power and swiftness; the perfect circle for the sun, the life-giving source of all existence. I listened, feeling as though I, too, were learning from the very beginning, like a child absorbing fundamental truths. "Mr. Vance, you try weaving," a mischievous boy named Daniel called out, his eyes sparkling with playful challenge. I laughed and shook my head, feeling a familiar reluctance, but Sarah gently guided me to the chair. "Don't be shy, Leo," she said, her voice warm. "Everything starts with a first step, no matter how small." I clumsily worked the loom, tangling the threads and making the children giggle with my awkwardness. But when I finished a small, crooked piece of fabric, misshapen but mine, I felt a strange, pure sense of joy. Not because I had done it well, but because I had dared to try, to be vulnerable, to fail and learn. In that moment, I realized this was the strength I had always been missing. Not the strength to compete or to win against others, but the quiet strength to learn, to grow, to be humble, and to not be afraid of failure. But every journey, no matter how profound, has its challenges. One brisk morning, as I was preparing for a Lakota language class, still practicing my pronunciation, I received a thick, formal letter from Ethan's lawyer. He was suing me, claiming co-ownership of the house and arguing that our parents' will was ambiguous, open to interpretation, giving him a claim to the artifacts. The letter was a crushing blow, leaving me stunned and breathless. I had thought my conflict with Ethan was resolved, that he had finally let go after I secured full legal ownership. I was wrong. Ethan didn't just want money. He wanted to prove I was unworthy, that I would always be the passive loser, forever in his shadow. I called Jacob, and he came immediately, his wisdom a soothing balm. We sat on the porch, looking at the distant, majestic mountains, and I told him everything, my voice heavy with weariness. "I'm tired, sir," I said, my spirit drained. "I just want to do what's right. But why is everything so difficult? Ethan, Claire, the people trying to buy the artifacts, it feels like the whole world is against me, pushing me back." Jacob was silent for a long moment. Then he pointed to the sky, where a magnificent eagle was circling effortlessly, a speck against the vast blue. "See that eagle?" he asked, his voice quiet, profound. It flies high, Leo, but not because there is no wind against it. It flies high because it knows how to use the wind to lift itself higher, to soar. Your challenges, Leo, are that headwind. Don't let them knock you down. Use them to soar higher, to become stronger. His words gave me a new perspective, a renewed sense of purpose. Ethan, Claire, the difficulties, they weren't enemies meant to defeat me, but lessons meant to strengthen me. I decided to face Ethan, not with anger or resentment, but with a quiet, unshakable resolve. I hired a skilled lawyer, and we meticulously prepared for the upcoming trial. In the meantime, I steadfastly continued my work at the Cultural Center, refusing to let the lawsuit impede our progress, refusing to let it steal my joy. Each day, I felt stronger, not because I was confident I would win the case, but because I knew with absolute certainty that I was fighting for what was right, for a legacy far greater than myself. The trial was held in Cheyenne, the state capital, a few hours' drive from the quiet refuge of Cedar Creek. I walked into the imposing courtroom, my heart steady, and faced Ethan for the first time since his last visit to the house. He was still handsome and confident, his suit impeccable, but I saw a new hollowness in his eyes, the emptiness of someone chasing only fleeting material wealth, a permanent hunger. When I was called to testify, I told my story without reservation, without holding anything back. I spoke of my unexpected journey to Wyoming, the profound discovery of the artifacts, the nascent cultural center, and why I would not, allow them to fall into the hands of those who would not honor their sacred spirit. I'm not doing this for myself, I said, looking directly at the judge, an older woman with sharp, discerning eyes and a wise expression. I'm doing this for my family, for the Lakota tribe, for those who fought and suffered to keep this legacy alive for generations yet to come. Ethan, in stark contrast, spoke only of the house and artifacts' monetary value, of market prices and investments, insisting he deserved to share his rightful portion. But I saw that the judge was unmoved by his cold figures, by his eloquent arguments for profit. In the end, after days of testimony, she ruled definitively that the house and its contents belonged to me, citing the absolute clarity of our parents' amended will and my demonstrated commitment to the legacy's profound cultural significance. As we left the courtroom, Ethan looked at me, his face devoid of emotion, but said nothing. I wanted to tell him I wasn't keeping the house to spite him, that I still loved him as a brother, that there was a place for him here too, but I knew that, at least for now, Ethan wasn't ready to listen. I just nodded a silent acknowledgement of our fractured bond and walked away, feeling a great weight, a lifelong burden, lift from my shoulders. Back in Cedar Creek, I held a small, intimate ceremony to thank the community for their unwavering support, their belief in me. We lit a towering bonfire under the open, star-filled sky, the flames dancing and crackling, sang ancient Lakota songs that echoed through the valley, and shared stories of our ancestors, their lives intertwining with ours. I stood before everyone, no longer the timid man who had arrived with a set of rusty keys and a heart full of doubt. I was Leo Vance, a man who had found his inner strength not through external victory, but through daring to live true to himself, to his authentic self. I began writing a book, slowly, carefully chronicling my story and my family's, basing it largely on my grandfather's precious journal. I wanted future generations, children like Daniel, like the young girl who gave me the beaded necklace, to know they carried a precious, living legacy. I also delved deeper into Lakota culture, participating actively in ceremonies, learning the language, and even trying my hand at traditional hunting, though I was still a clumsy novice who made David Swift arrow laugh until he cried with my ineptitude. My happiness now came not from what I owned, but from what I could give, from what I could nurture. Each time a child learned a Lakota word, each time the drum sounded at a ceremony, each time a visitor's eyes widened with understanding, I felt I was repaying my ancestors, not with money, but with love, with reverence, and with profound responsibility. One evening, standing on the porch and gazing at the star-filled sky, so vast and comforting, I felt as if my grandfather was somewhere, looking down, smiling. I touched the sweet grass necklace Jacob had given me and whispered, "Thank you for believing in me, Grandpa." The wind blew through the pines, carrying the scent of wild earth and freedom, and I knew that no matter how difficult this journey became, I would never walk alone. I was no longer the weak Leo who always yielded. I was Leo, a descendant of Madonagi, who found purpose, joy, and peace in protecting his ancestors' legacy. And in my heart, for the very first time, I was truly proud of my Lakota heritage.